Just a few weeks ago, just about every massive asset manager started applying for a spot Bitcoin ETF. And while people thought there's no way companies like BlackRock and Fidelity would get rejected, the SEC has just rejected almost every spot Bitcoin ETF that has come to them recently. When you see news and headlines like these, it could cause many people to panic. But this video will explain why they've rejected the ETFs and what it could mean for Bitcoin's price. SEC says spot Bitcoin ETF filings are inadequate. Regulator tells NASDAQ, CBOE that applications from BlackRock, Fidelity, and others aren't clear and comprehensive. Now, headlines like these, when you first see them, may make you feel some type of way, but under the surface, it's actually for a valid reason, which is kind of crazy to say when you're thinking about the SEC in crypto and them actually being somewhat reasonable. Now, let's go into exactly why they decided to put a pause on all of these spot Bitcoin ETF filings. Now, one thing we have to remember is that a spot Bitcoin ETF has the same exact features as a futures ETF. The only massive difference, which is very important for Bitcoin's price because of the supply, is that in a spot ETF, the asset manager actually has to hold that physical asset. So if it's Bitcoin that's being traded and we know that there's only so much of a supply left, like when we look over here, when an asset manager has to hold Bitcoin physically and there's only 1.5 million left in existence to be mined, then that's going to fluctuate price dramatically. And while when you read the headlines and it looks like, okay, the SEC is rejecting all spot Bitcoin ETFs, they just hate crypto, nothing is looking good. When you read into why they rejected it, it actually is under a valid reason. And it says, yet the SEC told the exchanges that it returned the filings because they didn't name the spot Bitcoin exchange with which they are expected to have a surveillance sharing agreement or provide enough information about the details of those surveillance agreements. Asset managers can update the language and refile. So basically, in an alternate headline, or another way to phrase it, is that the SEC just wants to file the names of the crypto exchange, which will be Coinbase, and give more details on their surveillance sharing agreement. Now, if you don't know what a surveillance sharing agreement is, it basically refers to the information that is shared with regulators in order to prevent potential market manipulation. Again, we're talking about a spot Bitcoin ETF, which fluctuates the price of Bitcoin dramatically because you have to own the assets. Now, if that price starts to fluctuate, futures ETFs also go off the spot price of Bitcoin. So if that price is manipulated in the spot market, that means the futures market will also be manipulated, which holds billions and billions of dollars. So it could affect a lot of people. So the SEC on this one, which I don't think I'm ever going to hear myself say again, is correct on this. I mean, that's definitely a very important thing because when we're talking about Bitcoin, if we have all these investors and institutional people coming into the markets, we do want to keep it safe. We do want to keep it from being manipulated by big money. And so just because the SEC rejected a lot of these spot Bitcoin ETFs doesn't mean it's the end for Bitcoin, or doesn't mean it's the end for the spot Bitcoin ETFs. They just want them to refile and basically name the crypto exchange, which is going to be Coinbase, and give them a little bit more information on their surveillance sharing agreements. Now, this coincides with basically everything I've been saying on my channel and how I think this 2023-2024 bull market is going to play out. Now, you could see when you're looking at the 2018 to 2020 time frame, you can see that the bear market dropped around 84%. We had 500 days of pre-halving action where really not much happened. While we did have a 360% gain, as you could see basically from the top to the bottom for the next 8 to 10 months, the market really just fluctuated. And now we're kind of going to the same exact point where we had a 77% drop in the bear market. From the point of the bottom to where we are now, we've had a 100% gain, but we're at that same time frame where we're about 8 to 10 months from the Bitcoin halving. And as I've talked about before, we are at a very critical level for Bitcoin where $30,000 seems to be a very tough point for Bitcoin to break. While there's a lot of reasons behind this, I think one of the biggest ones is liquidity. And of course, we're at a very strong prior price action point where we could see that there's been a lot of price action for Bitcoin at this level right over here, which you could see there's been multiple touches and multiple rejections of this $30,000 level. And of course, it's a very big level because it's the highest that we've been in over a year when we reached the peak right over here at 31,000. But if we take a look back and compare the two, 2019 to basically 2023, the year before the halving, it's very important that if we take the ghost feed, basically look at what happened over here and kind of coincide it with what could possibly happen to right over here, you can see that this is personally what I think. I think that we could stay below 30,000, or even if we wanted to, I think Bitcoin could possibly shoot up to 35, but I don't think it's going to be sustained. I think over the next 8 to 10 months, obviously, a big catalyst for Bitcoin's price is going to be these spot Bitcoin ETFs coming out and actually going live. However, it's going to take some time, right? This is not going to be a 1 or 2 day process. It's going to be multiple months. And I personally believe that the spot Bitcoin ETFs won't go live until the beginning of 2024. And that also coincides with hopefully when the US economic recession worries kind of fade away. And of course, we're at the same time frame from right over here, just about 8 months out from the Bitcoin halving. And so when we're talking about Bitcoin's price and the price action that could happen within that, it looks like we could see something identical to what we saw in 2019 in the pre-Bitcoin halving. And at that point, I think that's when we start to get our bear market. But until then, I really don't see much happening in price action. While if you're a day trader, it might be really good for you. But I think in the long term, we have to go through this long, arduous process where basically a lot of these asset managers now have to rewrite a lot of their spot Bitcoin ETF filings. Then they have to refile with the SEC. The SEC has to relook at all of these. Then they have to pick and choose who they want to approve. If not, they can approve everybody. But then they also have to go to the process of all the other background stuff before it actually goes live. So to basically sum up this video and the news that came out on the SEC, the news of them rejecting these ETFs is not bad news. It's actually something that the SEC did very good and very well for the Bitcoin price and the Bitcoin market and the whole cryptocurrency market. They're not making it easy for price to be manipulated, which is really good, especially if you're a true believer in what Bitcoin stands for and everything else. You don't want this institutional money coming in and basically messing up the entire market. Now, on top of that, in terms of price, I think we're just going to see the same thing that we saw in 2019. Very similar price action. While we could maybe even go up higher to 35, possibly 40K, I really don't think that bull market is going to happen until we reach the Bitcoin halving, or at least March, April of 2024. As we could see, we are still kind of in those recession worries. So for the rest of 2023, and I'll make a video on this tomorrow or a couple days from now, you're going to see how important it is for liquidity, global liquidity, to be in these markets and how it drives cryptocurrency prices, because they are risk assets at the end of the day. But I hope this video informed you. I hope it helped you understand what's going on with the spot Bitcoin ETFs and Bitcoin's price. But until the next video, I'll see you guys then.